we're going to do is we're going to get started, and if anybody else joins in, you will hear a doorbell sound. Please do ignore that. It's just a notification that someone's entered. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the South Asian Women in Higher Education Network's Researcher Series 2026. It's wonderful to have so many of you in the room today. I can see some new names in here, so that's fantastic. And if you are new, thank you for connecting. And those of you returning, it's amazing to have you back here today. So my name is Dr. Rumi Begum. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Westminster. My area is in life sciences and in particular nutrition and exercise science. And I'm also part of the SAWHE Inner Circle in terms of a lead. And my sort of area is the events manager sort of role. Today I will be co-chairing this session with our founder, Dr. Saima Rahman Khan. And as always, our intention for these sessions really were to spotlight the fantastic work that's happening within the area of research, many different disciplines, and what South Asian women are doing across the higher education sector, amplifying their voices in this particular scenario. Secondly, we want to help each of us kind of pursue knowledge, new knowledge maybe knowledge that we have started learning and we want to know more about, and think in different ways. So asking questions, having conversations, inspiring each of us to move forward in our work and creating this SAWHE community. By creating these opportunities to share research and exchange ideas, we'd like to build this supportive academic community within disciplines and across disciplines where possible. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Saima, who's going to introduce our final guest of the series.
Thank you, Rumi, for the excellent introduction and for putting together the SAWHE Researcher Series exactly 6 months back. And we are in the 12th session now already, can't believe it. But it's amazing efforts from yourself and the SAWHE Inner Circle. As Rumi introduced me, I'm Saima. I'm the founder of the SAWHE Network. I also work as a project manager at 2 different sectors, both the NHS and at the University of Manchester. And today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our final speaker of this researcher series, Ruksana Beigi. Ruksana is a senior lecturer and a course leader for early childhood studies at the University of East London. She believes research should be creative as it is rigorous and is always exploring new ways of thinking, doing, making, and sharing research that challenges traditional boundaries. And Ruksana has a number of publications, so I'm going to put 3 of her publications from 2025 into the chat if you'd like to explore further. And Ruksana is a lady of many talents. She also is an author, and with her new book coming out later in the year, so do ask her about it later in the session as well. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Ruksana, and please do introduce yourself, and looking forward to hearing about your research. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to SAWHE for this opportunity. I come from 2 heritages, so I come from Middle Eastern and also South Asian, and you know, it's a privilege to be recognised and to be able to bring what I bring to the research arena. So thank you for that. So as Saima said, I'm a course leader for early childhood studies. Early childhood studies has been my passion. It's been where I've invested my whole career, over 25 years in. And I suppose, in a way, the lens that I bring for early childhood studies is what I apply to research, but to my students, who I think some of them are in the audience, so welcome to them. So I always look at that child that's in an early year setting and think, how as an educator would I like to interact with them? And that's what I bring to my work in all ways, really. So just a little bit about oh, I knew that was going to happen. Stop there we go. So there's nearly 3-year-old me. And I'm not going to say how old I am now, but a little bit in terms of my story. I think it's more of a story of becoming, because although I've been in early years for over 25 years, because I even include my time at the university, it actually has taken me near enough 14 to 15 years to find myself as a researcher. You know, so And why has it taken that long is a question. So, my research, as a child, creativity was always part of it. My mother's stories, my nanny's cookings, my father's poetry, early as practitioner, lecturer, and even as a mother, because I have to find creative ways to engage my chaotic, nearly 6-year-old. And stories, art, culture, even community, with the SAWHE community, it's all part of the creativity. So I just felt that so much of it shaped my life, but why am I finding in the arena of academia stifled with questions, findings, analysis, and then reporting. So I had to step back and think, what am I bringing? I've got these different stories, I've got cultures, I've got relationships, but they're not fitting into these traditional spaces. And that was always on my mind. And I think that's one of the things that stopped me from doing research much earlier on in my career, but also stopped me from pursuing a doctorate as well, because I couldn't find my creative practitioner self marrying with the traditional aspects of academic life. And I always found myself, sort of floating amongst them. So, I then took a step back and thought to myself, our life worlds are very messy. They're relational, we're full of emotion in terms of lived experience, and it's very unpredictable. So what counts as data is really unpredictable, because what it might be in that one moment, it will probably change as soon as my gaze moves. And of course, it's creative. Our lives are creative, and we don't seem to understand that we do it all the time. So some of those aspects is, does our research methods need to reflect this? What can I do if I disrupt this? And then I thought, why am I trying to fit into academia? Why am I trying to fit into this research world? Why don't I start creating? And before we process, I want all the audience to know that all the images that you see on my slides is actually data. And if there are any particular ones that you want to know more about, please keep hold of them. And we can always revisit in the Q&A, and I can tell you a bit more about them. So there was that. So I thought, what if it's drawing? And I'm not saying drawing that, that you can actually understand. It can be a doodle. What if it was storytelling? What if I walked and interviewed you rather than sitting in a room? What if we made something together? What if I just listened? And what if your silence is data? And what if creating is data? So these are some of those things that have come out in terms of that. And I would like to say that over the years, especially in education, a lot of this has been coming out as research, especially new materialism and non-representational theory, which comes from geography. So we are looking at even atmosphere being data. So these are some of those aspects that sort of come out. So then it was like, well, creative disruption. Why don't we disrupt what is the norm? What counts data? What is knowledge? The linear ways that we do research. For example, in my own doctoral studies, I went straight for the data. I went and did my field work. I didn't do any reading. I didn't do any, I disrupted. And I'm also in my doctoral studies not going to do a literature review. So these are those ways, those linear ways of knowing. Academic language, researcher identity, and power. And I've got a slide for each one. Creative disruption starts with questioning, always staying with the question. Okay, so why don't we disrupt what counts as data? So traditional, it's interviews, surveys, observations, written text, because they're easy. They're easy to do. Okay. But creative disruption asks, what if a doodle is data? It means something. What if my participant's silence at that moment is data? What if movement, sound, texture, and even the atmosphere, because there's a lot around atmospheric methods at the moment, the change of the atmosphere. And what if a torn piece of paper tells me something? I don't want to draw, so that tells me something. Okay, so it's that idea of disruption. Disrupting who gets to produce knowledge, right? Academics are the experts, participants are the subjects. We extract and then we put it into the academic world, but does it reach them? Okay, so it's about co-creation. So rather than extraction, let's go anti-extraction. Okay, value the lived experience. It's going back to my own experience of becoming, my experience of stories, my experience of culture. What is the lived experience of my participant? And creating spaces where they can shape direction of the inquiry. Okay, and in particular with South Asian women, because we're often overlooked, filtered, or translated through those dominant perspectives. We have to have a particular voice, a particular way of writing. And if you think about grandma telling you a story, she doesn't do it in a particular way. She doesn't make sure the grammar is correct, or and things like that. So why are we not bringing those ways of working into our actual writing? And this is why I like I never say it properly, vignettes. I like writing them because they are raw, they are chaotic, but they also give you the emotional aspect, which sometimes is missing from writing. Okay. Disrupting linear ways of knowing. Of course, we get the question, we collect the data, we analyze it, and we have the findings. But creativity, when we look at it through an inquiry perspective, it's messy. We follow what emerges, we return to moments, we allow uncertainty, and we stay with the questions. We're not looking for the answers in creativity. What are the questions? Because questions give questions. But I think the most important thing is it shifts how we see things. Our gaze. It's not about that finding and being the science, but actually how has creativity shifted? How has this moment with this participant shifted my gaze in what I understand about research and the topic that I'm actually researching? Academic language. We leave parts of ourselves. There's a proper way to be researchers, but what about stories? What about poetry? What about emotion? What about writing differently? The image on this particular one is of a participant who wrote to their future self as a parent, and that is data. Their emotions are in there. What they want their child to have in the future is all in there. So here it's not about disrupting paradigms or methodologies, because I have respect for people who've built their professional and personal identities on it. It's about the possibilities. What more can we do? And in terms of AI technology taking over, where is the humanity and the ethics in our research? Where can we still make research humane? And creativity is that aspect of it. Okay. And of course, disrupting the researcher identity. Okay. There is me with my Kurdish attire. We have multiple identities: mother, daughter, carer, community member, artist, educator. Nobody here can tell me they're not an artist. We are. It's something called brute art. Have a look at it. We are artists. Okay. So creativity disrupts this, and it challenges the idea that we have to separate all of this. It asks, if we bring all of this, if I bring my cultural heritage of poetry and storytelling and all that to research, what can become possible? So these are some of those ideas. And of course, lastly, disrupting power through methodology. Okay. Not everyone can communicate in a formal interview or a questionnaire or a survey. Okay. But art making, storytelling, collage, these are entry points. They give me a lot more. They reduce barriers. They create different ways of having a conversation, and they enable those voices that might otherwise remain unheard. And some of those examples are to follow. And I would like to give you those now. I know I'm going a bit in there, but here, for example, this is my research with postnatal mothers who've got babies as young as 3 months, 3 weeks, all from different backgrounds, and some of them had language barriers. But collage helped them to identify who they are, not as a wife, as a mother, as a sister, but who am I? And it came out, some of them were henna artists, some of them were creative in their cooking. They had an Instagram channel which nobody knew about. But others, example, the one right in the middle, there was this the image of the lady with the flowers. What she explained to me was that this is what I want to be. I want to be happy. And she started crying. So it's those emotions that come out of that. These are further things. So these are just sketches of where I want to be. And if I don't know if you can see my arrow, I don't want to give motion sickness. Oh, there we go. There we go. With here, they want you to pursue their dream, but they felt they were held back as a mother of children. And how can they get over the brick wall? A lot of them took scrap pages home to share and celebrate their families, and they brought back these things. Nature is their way of life. They bring their family together with nature, what love is in terms of that, who their world evolves around. So this is all creativity in that sense. And I particularly like this one because there was a very negative, I feel, chaos, jobs, having to do study, having to do chores in the house, my having a baby, but my marriage is stifling. But as she took this page away, she then started to be to be positive about what other things do I do. So these are those types of access points into conversations that I was talking about earlier. And going back, this idea of research and creativity, why am I going on about it? People, there's over 1,000 definitions for creativity. Okay. And the idea here is not about research looking pretty at the end of the day. Okay. It's about thinking differently. It's about all the imaginative ways you could do research and the possibilities. And I'm a very strong advocate of Anna Kraft, who passed away a number of years ago. And she looked at creativity for early years, and she talks about what are the possibilities? What if we did this? Researching creativity is about generating knowledge differently, engaging participants differently, and communicating that research differently. And these are just some of the ways: visual methods, art-based inquiry, storytelling, poetry, photography. My own research, I don't do interviews, not saying that you can't. I just use images, videos, and audio because I like the naturalness to just come out in its way. And yes, then it's labor intensive trying to make sense of it, but actually it has to be natural for participants. So these are just some of those ways. But what ultimately I'm trying to say about creativity is a language. It is a language, and every individual possesses it because it's about thinking, questioning, imagining, and all the possibilities that come with it. Okay. If I was to give you £1,000, what are the possibilities with that £1,000? You could go to have a quick holiday, all those possibilities. Creativity is that idea of the language. And this is why my participants possess it, because they possess it through here. Now, these were interesting because these were masks in terms of emotional worlds. What do I present to you? But what is really my mask behind the one that I present to the world? And this one was this was of a mother who, after a young mum, actually, from another country, adjusting to life here, had her first baby, ended up staying 11 days in hospital. Okay. The image with the lipstick is how people perceived her, that you're enjoying your life. You look so fresh, you're adjusting to motherhood. But actually what she said was, this is how I really feel. Mood swings, my stomach is not the same. My wrinkles, I feel awful. Okay. And it was even more powerful when that mother put that mask on and showed it to us. But her English was broken. She was able to communicate. She had another participant write down the words for her, but they were entry points to be able to actually find out. And I would not have got this if I had just sat down and spoken to her. So that's, so there are those aspects of it. And here, apart from being a mother, apart from being, a student, who are you? And this is what one participant strives to be. I'm strong. But what was interesting, when I asked her to write down beautiful, she refrained from doing it first. There was a hesitant, and I won't go into a lot because obviously it was quite, there was a rawness to it. But in the end, after we spoke, she then put on the word beautiful. So it was interesting to see what people's perception of beauty was as well. So within those aspects. Okay. And here we talk about demographics. We want to know how old you are, where you are from. This was fabric art. And I learned more about my participants in what they drew about themselves, what they painted about themselves, than I would have in my tick box. How old are you? Where would you, so, and this yet again was conversation. Okay. So why does it matter? Why creativity? And the image here, this, believe it or not, were images that my students painted recently on cardboard. And then I took close shots with photographs and presented it as this artwork to them. So this is all, and even here, one of my students was like, "Oh, Ruksana, it's dripping," but I said it's beautiful. So why? Because it opens access to different voices. It challenges that power structure between researcher and participant. It encourages people to engage, and it generates unexpected insights. I've learned more about people research than I would have if I stuck to my science. And it creates richer understanding about lived experience. I think one of the things we forget in research is we do it for people's life worlds. So how does that look? Okay. And ultimately, sometimes people can show what that they cannot easily in words. So, so it was that aspect of it. So just a bit about my PhD research, which I'm now becoming confident in speaking about. But I'm actually looking at art making itself with early years practitioners, because one of the issues raised is that practitioners are not artists, and that if you've got the funding, you bring in professional artists. However, we know that with cost of living, we know, with inequality, we know that some of our private settings, early year settings, are just about meeting ends, that having an artist doesn't always work. So, but then I also know that in the curriculum, expressive art and design is one of the areas that we have to teach children. So why is it practitioners don't know? So instead of asking what do practitioners think about art, which there's a whole load of literature, I thought, what happens if they make it? What can I get out of watching them make art? What emerges? What moves? What becomes possible? So participants worked with all sorts of things. And this is the thing, it's not just about art. Creativity is in the stones we found outside. Creativity is when we put fabric out and put all sorts of plants in and mashed it up and came up with things. The materials have become the inquiry, and my research is embedded in new materialism, which talks about the human and the non-human always entangled, and non-representational theory. I am not there to represent this is this is what the themes are. I'm actually there to say this is what happened, and that's very different to that idea. So these are some of the things that have come out of it. A practitioner working with charcoal all of a sudden became emotional and started to cry. Would that have happened if I spoke to them about charcoal? So, questions. Some of these practitioners have actually never touched the materials themselves or engaged with what they put out for children. So it was a first time. People working with dry sand were very happy. As soon as I put water in it, one of them was like, I'm not touching this. I don't like the texture. So then the question is, what about the children? So it's all of those aspects that have come out of it. But what really came out of, and Rumi, this one's for you, the science data. In traditional view, data is collected, but my alternative view is that I encountered it. It was a tear in a paper, it was a silence, it was a gesture, it was a conversation, it was a mark, and it was emotional response. So I don't think as researchers, data is waiting to be found. It's always there and it emerges, and it's a different way of seeing. Creativity is a gaze, and it's a different way of seeing when you apply it. Okay. And of course, everybody, challenges. There's always challenges. And in the academic world, it's the expectations, questions of rigor. Really, somebody crying, is that really data? Funding requirements. Of course, I've read abundance of wonderful researchers who've had to change their applications and take out creativity just to get the funding. And even ethics processes. If I'm photographing and I'm keeping it real by not blurring, what does that say for ethics? And publication norms, we want a literature review, a methodology, but what if I start off with a story? Okay. And of course, there's self-doubt. Okay. And please, I want everyone in the audience to know, I'm not even going to say audience, the community. I wasn't, we are born creative, but it took me a long time to find my voice where creativity is. And I'm not saying it's something that will happen overnight. But it is something that can be achievable, okay? Because creativity does demand us to justify ourselves, and disruption is uncomfortable, but it's also labor intensive. And what I mean is all these wonderful images you've seen, it's all about resources. It's about getting it there. It's about having that time. It's about taking photographs and all of that sort of stuff, and then having to look through it all. It's very labor intensive, but you can only do it if you have a passion for it and if you want to bring something different. And one of the earlier conversations I was having with the wonderful chairs was AI. AI is changing the face of research in many ways. And one thing we have to remember is it's learning from us. It's learning from our creativity. It's learning from what we put into it. But it will exceed us one day. And this is why we have to be creative in research, because data can be crunched now. There's all sorts of AI apps where you can put your data in. It gives you the themes, it gives you the codes, it gives you all of that. But if you are making with the hands and you're creating, that's something totally different. And I will not be surprised if in the future research will have to have some form of artifact that presents your research, because that will show that you have done it. So there's all those ideas regarding that. So lessons I've learned: there's no single way to be a researcher, everybody. Okay. Creativity is not the opposite of rigor, because I've shown that in my publications. Okay. And some of our most powerful insights happen unexpectedly. And I always say methodologies are there to serve the participants. So this is why every research topic is different, because every community that participates is different. And this is why difference is a strength. And creativity brings that to light. Okay. So going back to my story of becoming, okay, as you've noticed, I didn't put much literature. That was me being disruptive because I was bringing my own voice. Okay. But I'm going to give you one here, because in becoming creative, I am modest. Okay. And I'm going to stay with that modesty. And I am being what Bernard et al. Called rebellious in many ways, because I believe what Latha says, another type of science is possible. Okay. And I'm also answering the call that was made by Lynette and colleagues last year, who say be disruptive. Okay. They use the word refusing the norms, but I use reimagining the norms that dictate what research, writing, collaboration, and knowledge sharing should look like. Okay. I've got an invitation for you to think about, as researchers, as a community, what assumptions shape your research? What possibilities have you dismissed? What voices maybe you're silencing them as part of your research? And what would happen if you, Rumi, went out and did an experiment and created something instead? Okay. So just before we end, is what is one research rule you would have always accepted, but you're now willing to question if I've inspired you? Okay. So research is not always about finding the answers. It's about possibilities. Creative disruption is an opening to new voices, new methods, new understandings, and perhaps new ways of becoming researchers. Okay. And before I end, I'm not sure if the Swahi community knows what this image is. I have taken it from the wonderful Dr. Beanish. I don't know if she's joined us today. If she hasn't, this one's for you. But I was very intrigued by this. And then I was thinking that the South Asian community, Bangals are in all the cultures. They are also in my Kurdish culture, in my Pakistani culture. And I was very inspired with this. Now, the next slide that I present to you is me showing you creativity in practice. I have not had any verbal interaction with wonderful Saima or Rumi or Zainab, from the community, but I have been looking at LinkedIn. I have been looking at your website, and I have been, following all the posts that you have done. And that is the data that I have used to create the next slide. And what I'd like the audience to do is don't concentrate on the slide, because I'm going to read it to you. It's a little bit long, okay? But what I'd like you to do, either close your eyes or look away and listen to what I'm saying, because what I've done is use this data to actually say what the SAWHE community network is about, okay? So here we go, okay? So I'm going to start. We arrived carrying our stories wrapped in saris, stitched in shalwar kameez, echoing in the gentle rhythm of bangles, passed from mothers, aunties, sisters, and grandmothers who taught us strength long before we knew its name. Stories that traveled across oceans, across generations, across classrooms and campuses, finding their way here, Some of us were the first to step into lecture theatres, the first to pursue a doctorate, the first to speak with confidence in rooms where our names were unfamiliar and our stories were absent. Yet we carried worlds with us, languages, memories, recipes, songs, and dreams, ways of knowing that existing long before universities, long before journals, long before someone decided what counted as knowledge. And still we came to learn, to teach, to question, to lead, not leaving parts of ourselves at the door, but bringing our whole selves with us. Because our histories matter. The hands that fastened our bangles matter. The women who adjusted our dupattas, plaited our hairs, packed our bags, and told us to be brave matter. They are here too, woven through every achievement, every publication, every lecture, every student whose life we touch. And now we gather, researchers, academics, professional staff, my beautiful students, leaders, not as isolated individuals, but as a community that understands what it means to be visible and what it means not to be, a community that chooses to lift as it climbs, a community that knows there is room for every voice. May we continue to create spaces where our stories are heard, our knowledge is valued, and our presence is celebrated. May we mentor generously, speak courageously, and lead authentically. May we leave the door wider open than we found it, and may those who come after us walk through without hesitation, knowing they belong, because we were here, because we came together, because through solidarity, scholarship, and sisterhood, we did more than take a seat at the table. We changed the shape of the room. Thank you so much for having me.
Woohoo! Touch. Thank you, Ruksana. It's really like heart-touching.
Thank you.
Rumi, we are not able to hear you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Sorry, you made me emotional there, and I had to turn my camera off for a bit.
Absolutely, Ruksana. This is a stellar poem, and if you don't mind, we would love to spotlight this on
This
our
is for
LinkedIn
you.
and
This is for
even on
you.
our website. If we want to make sure that this is being visible, and the network members would absolutely relate it and appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing.
You are most welcome. This is for you.